Your industrial sales pitch might be good,
but today we're going to show you how to make it even better.
Today we've got a good one talking about how to pitch. If you guys are not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please head over to it, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, where we have over 950 videos about industrial sales and industrial marketing. So let's jump into today's episode. Now we're on camera 2. So today, what are we talking about? We're talking about how to pitch industrial products or services. So the first thing in how to pitch industrial products or services, and I know a couple things about this because I've seen a ton of people do this wrong, completely wrong. So the first thing is what, Alex? Read that off.
Are you prepared?
So are you prepared? All you salespeople out there that think that you guys are the best, unless you're making like $500,000 a year in industrial sales, you're not the best. So eat a little humble pie. You're here to learn. And I'm telling you that most of you guys typically aren't prepared. The reason for that is because you were probably taught by somebody that isn't the best in the field to teach you how to prepare for this. But it all comes down to, do you know your pitch? Do you know what you're going to say? Do you know how you're going to say it? Does it flow off of your tongue? Can you think on your feet? Do you understand what it is that you guys are selling, products or services in industrial? Alex, jump into that a little bit.
It's really important, you guys, to know and have a deep product knowledge, understanding, including the technical specifications, applications, and advantages, everything that your product can do and can't do. The can'ts are just as important as the cans, because that leads into knowing your target market. You know, if you don't know what your product or service can specifically do and what it can't do, you might bump into a customer or a client that's coming in. You don't know whether that product or service is actually going to work for them. You need to know the market that you're going into, know that everybody that you are going to be talking with, if you know your market, is actually going to be able to use your product and your service.
You don't have to have all of the answers to all the questions. And this is a common myth in industrial sales and any sort of technical sales. Usually what happens is they take the smartest person that knows the most about the product and they go through and promote them into a sales aspect because upper management owner thinks that you have to have all the answers technically in order to sell. But here's the gap that happens. Typically, those people that are super techie, know all the back-end engineering behind it, aren't focusing on the selling skills, knowing how to work deals through the pipeline, how to ask thought-provoking questions, how to pull the information out of the potential customer. They don't have those skills, nor do they work on them because they're focused on the technical side. So they do the classic show up and throw up where they just say, hey guys, Kyle, thanks so much for taking this time. I just wanted to review my spec sheets, review my line card, look at my press sizes, et cetera, and they're just throwing up information. Those of you that understand or know about Industrial Sales University, I got a whole course on how to pitch. And that's a big portion of it, is that show up and throw up. That is not how you want to do it. So that's not what I mean by know your information and be prepared. That comes down to understanding that you're there to have a conversation. You're not there to answer every question. You don't have to have every question to be able to be answered. You've got a team supporting behind you, but prepared from the standpoint that you know what it is that you guys do well. You know the mission that you're going after. You know the general services, and you know how to ask those questions. Our team here has a handful of questions that we ask on every discovery call when we train our clients' sales teams, whether they're an industrial marketing client or just a sales client. When we train them, we walk through the process of making sure that they are prepared, because usually they're just fumbling around everywhere. Next topic is going to be the purpose of the pitch. Number 2. Alex, what is the purpose of the pitch? What do I mean by that?
You got to be a little bit more specific in what you're saying by the purpose. There's lots of purposes of the pitch here. We're trying to sell somebody something, or we're trying to achieve, making their lives easier. That's really the purpose, I would say.
Yeah. So what I mean by that is, which camera are we on? That one. What I mean by that is, every different type of pitch in every different scenario has a purpose, right? So if Alex is making a cold call, the purpose of that pitch is to get them to the next stage and get them to book a discovery call. So that's what he's focusing on in that. Now, are there some possible scenarios where he calls somebody up, he meets somebody in person at a trade show, etc., and they want to go 3 steps down in that conversation, yes, that can happen. But generally speaking, you're trying to get enough information out from them and be able to schedule that next follow-up. So for you guys in industrial, it's going to be generate an RFQ. Now, so if your goal is to generate an RFQ, then you need to go into it having your stuff ready, point number 1 being prepared, and saying everything that I'm going to talk about in this conversation, whether it's on the phone, on a video call, in person, everything you're going to talk about is going to be related to trying to get that next step. So once you have your stages lined out and laid out, and you know from the call, from the initial contact, I'm trying to put them through a qualification phase, make sure that they need what you have, that they have the money, the funds, the budget for what it is that you're selling. Make sure they have all that. That's what I mean by like the purpose of the pitch. What do you got to say on that?
I wanted to touch back on something actually that you had said on the Are You Be Prepared, and then I'll touch on that real quick. So he had mentioned that not necessarily knowing all the answers on there is important. Being able to go and have that relationship with your team. I've had multiple times, I've gone into Kyle in the middle of a discovery call because I didn't have an answer, but I knew that, hey, Kyle is doing something, but I can go in and ask him a question because we have that relationship. I've gone into our COO, I've gone to our web design team to ask them questions in the middle of a discovery call. I obviously don't just get up and walk off. I go and I tell the client, hey, let me get that answer for you real quick. If it's okay, if I leave you here for 1 or 2 minutes, go get the answer to them, because then you can bring it back to them. It shows them that you have that relationship with your team, that you can go out, you can talk to your team, and your team is one unit, one cohesive unit. And then going back to the purpose of the pitch, again, as Kyle said, you need to know what your goal is. You need to know, okay, going into it. So when we're going into a trade show, I'm going in my first initial goal is to get the conversation going. And then that's purpose 1. The next purpose is as soon as you get the conversation going is to get them to book that discovery call. And then so on and so forth. After you get the discovery call, get them to go to the RFQ and then to eventually buy. If you don't have those steps in place, and you don't have those small goals in place, going from initial contact to selling seems like a really far off in the future, distant thing. But if you have those goals that you're achieving, those small goals you're achieving along the lines of this sales pitch, along the lines of the sales life, you are going to feel good. Hey, I've got that next goal. Now on to the next one. It's the small wins, guys.
Yeah. So it's like Alex saying, baby steps, right?
Yeah.
So you're just trying to take steps to it. And if you know the goal and you know the purpose of what you're trying to do, and you know the next step, and you're focused around that, you're going to be asking those questions to get that information to then set up the next stage. If it is a discovery call for us or an RFQ for you guys, in that initial conversation, you're just asking questions, but you know that that's the next step. So you want to make sure those questions around qualifying them at the same time, if you can, and pulling some information out of them to then segue and lead up to, hey, does it make sense at this point for us to provide you guys with some pricing, or do you guys have some opportunities out there that we can provide pricing on? That's what it's all about. Too often people are focused on, like Alex said, trying to get to the sale. And that seems far off. And that may be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 22 months, depending on what it is that you guys are selling. It could be a long sales cycle. But if you break it down into baby steps and say, all I'm looking to do is get a yes to this next step. And then from there and there, and you start stacking up those yeses, you're going to start creating some momentum and moving the ball further down the field. And you have better conversations, just going in there prepared and knowing the purpose. Because I've seen so many salespeople, they get like fumbled and don't really know, like they get lost in the conversation. And then in the end, it's like, did you get that RFQ? Oh no, I totally forgot. Like I was sidetracked with all this other stuff and they needed to get off the phone, or they needed to go on to the next person at a trade show. So go into it with that purpose. Anything to add on that?
Having that value-based selling, again, creating value, that's going to be one of the purposes. The initial purpose is to create value to someone, whether that be, showing them how the product or service is going to do, teaching them something about your product or service that they might not necessarily know about and how it can affect them or benefit them. And as well, value-based and solution-based selling. Those are the two big things that we all as sales guys know. You can do a bit of both, whether that be value and solution. Value-based is obviously going to be the first thing that you're going to try and provide to them. If you're going to show them what your product is worth, and then you can do the solution. If they say, hey, we've had these X, Y, and Z issues with previous products or services that are very similar to yours, that gives you into the solution selling. Hey, look, this is why we are better, is that we don't do X, Y, and Z that the other companies do because we're better at it.
Exactly. So on that note, let's go into point number 3, ask questions. The person that you're talking to, whether it's in person, on the phone, in video, etc., should be speaking more percentage of the time than you are. I mean, I'm not going to tell you an exact example, but I would say 60% of the time, 70% of the time, more than you are. The way to get people to do that is to ask questions. In all of the pitching, all you're trying to do is build trust. All throughout the sales process, you're just trying to build trust. So as you're focusing on solution-based selling instead of spec sheet selling, these are the specs of my machine. These are the specs of what I have in my shop. These are the specs of the equipment. Instead of going that way and you go solution-based, you have to ask questions because you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So having those key 5, 6, 7 questions lined up. So for you guys, ours would be different. But for you guys being like, what's the top 2 things that are issues with your supply chain right now? What problems are you having in your shop with this type of equipment? What are 3 KPIs or metrics that you track? What is one initiative that you have this year going into 2024 to improve your overall efficiency on the shop floor? Customize it to what you guys are selling, the service or the product, but you have to have those questions lined up and get the answers to those questions, because as you ask them the questions, sit there and listen, like high attention alert listening, not just waiting to respond, but ask those questions, wait for them to respond, and then continue to ask more questions to try and pull as much information out of them as possible. Right, Alex?
I mean, yes, obviously. And then I would, put that as understanding the buyer's journey, understanding what they're going through, understanding, what their typical journey is in the industry. And you got to tailor your sales approach to each different person. Asking those questions, you're going to better understand each buyer's journey. A lot of people out there, we're not necessarily selling just one product or service. We have multiple products or services that we are selling. They may have initially come in interested in our, a small product or service that you or we have to offer. But then you realize while talking to them and asking them those questions that actually they have a bigger hole over here that you can solve with a product or service that you have. And guess what? Sometimes it leads to a 2-for-1. You have somebody that has come in and is only looking at this small aspect of it, but you've taught them either through storytelling or, again, that value-based selling that, hey, actually, we can help you with this big hole that you have here. We can combine these 2 things. And guess what? That's a win-win for both you and the client.
Yeah, and it's really about having conversations, right? It's about having that conversation and asking them those things that are important. Asking them those things that are important, not just for you, but to help them develop. Like sometimes people don't realize that they have a problem until they have it, right? Like people come to Alex and say, or Mason, and be like, hey, so I want to talk to you about this. And it's like, let's take a couple steps back and let's ask some questions here to understand the lay of the land. No different than you guys. And as you ask them questions like, oh, you know what? I didn't think about that. Oh, you know what? We actually do have this other thing that we want to do too. So you're just asking questions to understand the situation. Maybe you uncover a problem that they weren't thinking of consciously, but they have been subconsciously. And then as that comes out, then you have a completely different solution that you're trying to sell them. Based on the questions, you then answer you provide a solution that's specific to their situation. Why go into somebody like and if you're selling machinery, I don't care what kind of machinery, why go into it and say that, look at this machinery, this is the footprint, this is the speed it could do, this is the efficiencies, this is the open, close, et cetera, if they just deal with a very small percentage. So asking them those questions and then saying, okay, so based on this information, what you're telling me is this is what's important to you and this is the situation. So based on that, the solution that I think would be best for you would be this specific press, this specific line of presses, this specific type of material, this specific marketing service. Like that's all that it's about, is ask questions, figure out and truly understand what is their situation. And then once you have enough information, then you offer up the solution. That is going to build trust way faster than just being like we've been in situations before where it's like, okay, so just give me a high level rundown of your company. I can't stand doing that because it's like, okay, we do like 8 different things. High level rundown is going to be, we are the leading industrial sales and marketing agency out there. We only work with industrial and manufacturing companies and we have no plan B. That's the high rundown. But then a lot of people will be like, okay, so we do this, we do that, and here's why we do it. And it's just like, before you know it, it's 6 minutes of the salesperson talking, the other person just sitting there listening, you assume, but you have to get that engagement. You can speak for a minute and ask them a question, and speak for a minute back and ask them a question. But it's all about that game of like, it's like ping pong, going back and forth, having a conversation, and not just, all right, I'm going to pitch to you guys for 45 minutes on the screen, sit there and listen and try not to fall asleep. Document
important.
everything. What do I say here, Alex? If it's not in HubSpot,
It doesn't exist.
it doesn't exist.
It never happened.
It doesn't. And that's just the truth of it, because how could you possibly organize? Now, if you've got like 10 leads you're working or like 100 contacts, you can organize that easily. But when you're talking about hundreds, thousands, 6 months in, 12 months in, hey, did you remember that deal from 2 years ago? Well, hit him back up. Like, when you have all that information, you have to document it in a centralized location. Alex, walk me through your process.
On our HubSpot, we have, when people are coming in, discovery call, RFQ, we have everything going through our phases. If you guys are going to lose out, or if you guys have lost a client, make sure you're putting the notes in there. Make sure you put the last form of communication. If you don't have a CRM system that's actually keeping track of everything that's going on in your emails, make sure that you're putting notes in there. If you're having phone calls, make sure you're putting the notes of the phone calls, because sometimes in your follow-up, that's when you're going to get an answer. Is, oh no, we've moved on, stuff like that. And if you aren't keeping those notes on those phone calls in your CRM system, or wherever you guys are keeping the logs of your contacts, no one's going to know. You're going to forget. There's going to be Bob Dylan from XYZ company, and there's going to be another Bob from.
Dang, Bob, isn't he a famous musician?
I think so. I don't know why I said Bob Dylan. BD just came to my head. Anyway, and then you're going to have Bob from another company, and you're going to get them mixed up, and then you're going to make yourself as well as your company look not so great when you're calling them going, hey, following up on this, following up on the proposal we sent over to you guys, seeing what you guys have thought. And they're going to go, we told you guys 2 months ago that we're not doing this until next year. So making sure that you have it in there. We have a nurture process. So when we lose a client that says, hey, we're not ready right now, or the budget isn't quite there right now, we're looking for the future, we have a nurture, putting them in the nurture, having different sections in your proposal process. In your closing processes, close one, nurture, lost if it's a genuine loss, but we all know that loss is never really lost.
Yeah, so, it's just not right now.
Right now.
And that's where you guys have to customize the information that you're trying to track to yourself. So maybe it's a custom field, like who's their current press manufacturer that they're buying? What's their annual spend? Like, customize all that stuff, because once you have the information, you could do things with it. And then you have the notes, like Alex said. Once you're talking to hundreds and thousands of people a year, and I know you guys may be like, dude, I only talk to like 200 people a year. You need to step it up. Even if your territory is small, you need to step it up. Have thousands of conversations a year. But tracking all that information in a centralized location like HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever your CRM system is, so that way you can recall it faster and easier in the future. And you can typically do some sort of list building automation behind it to say, show me everybody I talked to last year that has this specific competitor of ours listed as one of the companies that they work with, a company that they buy from. And then you can create strategic marketing, or your team can, behind, I want to go after this group of people that have this type of equipment. And with this case study showing them how ours is better than theirs, I might be able to turn some things loose. But documenting everything, recording everything, right? Whether you have Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, whatever the system is, record every single initial conversation. Every conversation you have with somebody, watch it back, like look at how you're talking, how you're pitching, what could you do better, but then putting it in a centralized location to say, what was that thing that they said on that call? Nobody's going to remember everything. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to deals and conversations with business stuff, and I'm not going to be able to remember everything. So being able to go back to that meeting, click it, play, hit the play, and be like, oh no, they said this. Documenting that all together along with your notes is the best way to set yourself up for success. But if you're not documenting it, you're not going to be organized. You're going to be spinning your wheels, not having a strategic plan of action of like, what am I going to do this quarter, this month, this week? If I don't have that information in there, if I haven't documented it, there's no possible way to follow up.
Make sure you guys also, if you have a loss, someone that comes in and is a lost client, make sure you ask them questions. Don't be afraid to ask them, hey, I know that some people don't want to share necessarily who they're going with, but even preface that like, hey, are you going, questioning who you're going with, who did you choose over us? Make sure you, again, preface it with, you don't have to obviously tell us if you're not comfortable with, but getting some feedback, because who knows, you could have an opportunity later on of a service or a product that you guys, a new service or product that you guys might start offering, that the reason why a client didn't go with you is because you weren't currently offering that. But if you keep those notes in there and you keep them, the notes in your CRM system, when that new product or service comes back around, you're going to remember that, wait a minute, what was the client that I think needed this product or service that we now have that you can again go back around in a year or so and follow back up with them.
Exactly. So, Alex, that was a perfect segue into number 5, the last point, because this is the most important, is the follow-up. Marketing did something, brought somebody into your lead, into your funnel, etc. Or you did something as a salesperson. That's a lot of time typically that goes into it. So once you work them through your funnel, they're not just going to either buy or leave right away. As you guys know, it could be 6 months of them ghosting you, 9 months. Maybe it's like, yeah, we're waiting on feedback. Yeah, we're waiting on this. This is where the follow-up comes in. It's not dead until they say it's lost, the project's off the table. And even then, like Alex is saying, it's just not right now. I look at everybody that says no is not no forever. It's just no, not right now. Even if they go with one of our competitors, we will do things to win them back.
We also know they're coming back if they go with one of our competitors.
Exactly. They always come back. Anybody that leaves always comes back because they think the grass is green on the other side, and then they realize it's not. And so with the follow-up, you have to have certain things. And we talked about this, I feel like the last sales live we did, I don't know, we talk about follow-up a lot. And there's different methods of follow-up, different channels of follow-up, but you have to have a strategic plan in place to follow up with every different stage of the deal. Once you quote it and send it out, what does your follow-up look like? What's your cadence? Is it once a week? Is it once every 2 weeks? Are you having the conversation with them saying, hey, I'm going to shoot you over this quote, and then I'm going to follow up with you in a week. Is that okay? Or letting them know your intentions. If I don't hear back from you by next Tuesday, I'm going to reach out for you, just letting you know. And they say, okay, yeah, definitely reach out to me, but I'll try and get back to you. Like setting that up to where you have the follow-up in place, you have the things set, because that is what's going to make the difference between those that are great and those that are just okay, is how often they follow up, how relentless they are with the follow-up. We've got deals in our pipeline that haven't moved in probably like 9 months. Does that mean we're just going to say, throw them over to close loss and forget about them? No, you just do some light follow-up, touch them every couple of months, stay in front of their face, maybe throw them into a marketing campaign, send them a connection request on LinkedIn just to stay in front of them. But it's all about the follow-up to keep those deals moving down the pipeline. And so many salespeople just in industrial say, I followed up twice. If they wanted it, they would have bought it. They would have responded to it. If they were interested, they would have responded to it. And that is never the case.
Never. I don't know how many times Kyle has come into us, making sure that we're following up, making sure that when we do follow up, again, keeping documentation of it. As he said, you can say all you want that, hey, I followed up with that client. I followed up. I did this. I did that. If it's not in the CRM system, how is your sales manager supposed to know? How is your CEO supposed to know? How's your vice president supposed to know that you're actually doing what you say that you're doing? You can't blame them if they come in and they go, well, I didn't see any of that. And they're annoyed at you because they can't see that you followed up. I would be even more annoyed at the fact that you followed up and then you didn't put it in there, because that's like, it didn't happen. As Kyle says, it didn't happen unless it's in there, and no one can really tell. And you guys are you're going to forget. You're going to forget the last time you followed up with them. You're going to get 6 or 7 follow-ups deep, and you're going to be like, I feel like I followed up with them last week, but in reality, you followed up with them like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then they've gone on with somebody else.
And if the data's in there, you just got to look, right? Like nobody can remember everything. If the data's in there, just look to see when's the last time there's follow-up, set a task, or do it right then and there. And it's that easy, but just making sure you stay on top of it and keep track of it. That's the key with the follow-up. But that 1,000% is the difference between those that make a lot of money in industrial sales and those that don't. Stand out, be different. Don't be like every single industrial sales guy out there that's just like 2 follow-ups, 3 follow-ups, and is like, dude, I'm out. They're obviously not interested in buying, so I'm just going to kick them to the curb. Maybe they'll come back next year. Never have that come out of your mouth. Always say, I'm going to control the situation. I'm going to control the narrative. I'm going to say, I'm following up again and again and again, and put them in something that does automatically possibly for you, but at a minimum have tasks set up.
Even if they say next year, make sure you guys aren't necessarily just following up next year, especially if you're selling a service. I know products are a little bit more difficult because they have a little bit longer lifespan, but especially if you guys are selling a service out there, make sure you're checking in, halfway through, maybe at the 6-month mark, checking in and making sure that the service that they decided to go on over you is actually still meeting their expectations. Because if you come in, you can look like Superman. You can come in and be like, hey, just making sure that everything's going well. And they're going, no, actually, this is awful. We're not having a good time. Everything that they promised us that they were going to do, they aren't doing. Then you can come and swoop in and take that business from them, because you're going to be the first one to have reached out again.
And it's no different, like in the pitch phase, no different than when you're going through just prospecting. Literally this week, we sent a message to someone and the guy's response was, your ears must have been ringing because I was just talking about you. I have not talked to this guy. We have not reached out to him in probably, I don't know, a year, 6 months to a year. Yeah, probably 6 months. And it just so happens, all about timing, we reach out to him. He's like, your ears must have been ringing. I was just thinking about you, just talking about you, and I want to jump on a conversation. And Mason's got a call with him on Friday, so tomorrow. So it's all about that follow-up to say, like, just checking in to see how it's going. You don't have to pitch them, just touching base, just putting something out there to say, hey, wanted to check in with you. Do you need anything? If you do, let me know. If not, I'll see you in 6 months. Guys, if you got value out of this content, share it with somebody that you know. Head over to my YouTube channel, subscribe, turn on notifications. If you want to listen to this in podcast, head over to every major podcast platform, Industrial Sales and Marketing with me. Hit your calendars, follow us both on LinkedIn, and hit your calendars to Tuesdays and every other Thursday. Tuesdays is industrial marketing. Every other Thursday is industrial sales. We will see you guys on the next one.